Welcome to the CEO Insider Podcast powered by YTexas. We are in Houston, Texas today at the WeWork building in beautiful downtown Houston. And our guest is the president and CEO of the Greater Houston Partnership, Mr. Bob Harvey. Hello, sir.
Sandy, nice to see you.
That was a wonderful presentation you gave, and a great Q&A. Right. I'd like to talk to you about recruitment and the fight for talent. Mm-hmm. That's the theme that keeps coming up with the different CEOs that I talk to, is that it is truly a global fight to get the best people. Absolutely. How is Houston as a whole doing in recruiting the best talent?
Okay. At one level, we must be doing well. We're growing very rapidly. You know, we added over 100,000 jobs last year in 2018, and that was among the top 3 cities in the country. So talent is coming to Houston. I would say we think about it 3 ways. First, we acknowledge the fact that talent's critical. Companies go where the talent is. 30 years ago, talent went where the companies were, so that's the difference. Today, talent decides where it wants to live, where it wants to work, and then companies choose to locate where they think the talent will be or is. So we're very conscious of that. In terms of baccalaureate degree talent, Houston has a bit of a disadvantage in that we don't produce as much of that locally. We depend very heavily on folks choosing to come to Houston because they see the opportunity here, they like our quality of life, they've decided this is where they want to locate. But that's absolutely critical. Now, at the same time, we'd like to produce more baccalaureate degrees locally, so part of our conversation with the Houston institutions and other nearby state institutions is how do we grow those programs and get more of those young people coming to Houston. So that's one piece. Now, there's another piece, which is middle skills, as we call them, which are the important piece of the talent pool, about 40% of the market, which doesn't require a baccalaureate degree, but it absolutely requires post-secondary, post-high school skills and credentials, and trying to help people think about how do they gain those skills rapidly, get back into the workforce, and if need be, go back for another round of additional skills and additional credentials at some later date. So we're working at multiple levels.
Yeah, it's an interesting take. I guess I had not thought of the disadvantage that Houston may have when it comes to producing baccalaureate degrees. And if you look at Austin, you've got the University of Texas.
Absolutely.
You've got College Station. You've got Texas A&M, and of course in Dallas you've got several.
That's right. Yeah.
Several. So I had not thought of it that way. That's interesting.
Well, and it can somewhat be framed around that. I mean, Texas A&M has grown, and those kids coming out of A&M will tend to go to Houston or Dallas, somewhat to Austin, but largely to Houston and Dallas. So
I live in Austin. They stay away.
Yeah, they tend to stay away. You know, that maroon color is just never taken away.
Right. Just
but we get a fair share of those young people in Houston. Our real issue is UT Austin because increasingly the UT Austin grads are staying in Austin, and that's not a recent phenomenon. It has changed a lot over the last 30 or 40 years. The fact is that as many UT graduates stay in Austin as return to Houston and Dallas combined. So that's really become an issue for Houston and Dallas. How do we better connect with that group? And those are very qualified kids, a lot of people with the digital skills that we're needing in Houston. So we think about that a lot.
Staying with the discussion regarding education, we're seeing a big growth and spike in enrollment in community colleges.
That's right.
And Houston is no stranger to that. The Houston Community College and its 22 campuses doing great things.
They do, and we're fortunate. We actually have 9 community college systems across the greater Houston area, centered around Houston Community College, which is pretty well captures the core of Houston. You know, community colleges at various times have focused on one thing or another. A few years ago, they had begun to shift themselves towards kind of providing the first 2 years of a 4-year college program. So you'd go to a community college and then go on to a 4-year school. That's a good thing, but it wasn't complete. We've had a lot of discussions with them about while they're doing that, they also should be thinking about how to give young people the skills and credentials they need to get back into the workforce quickly. A lot of young people have a semester or 2 at most where they can afford to be out of the workforce.
Right.
And the community colleges are absolutely critical to give the needed skills, hopefully the skills that the job market is calling out for, and then let those young people get back into the workforce quickly. So that balance between preparing kids to go on to a 4-year program versus preparing kids to get quickly back into the workforce is the balance we're hoping that they will strike.
And it provides them with a credential that they may need as they go back into the workforce.
Absolutely.
I'm curious your background. Tell me about
you. All right, I'm an Aggie, so you probably figured that out earlier.
I figured it out.
I went to Harvard, got an MBA at Harvard, went to McKinsey for 17 years. So I helped build the Houston office of McKinsey, almost from scratch back in the early 80s and through the 90s.
Really?
Then I was a vice chair at Reliant Energy through the the pre-Enron, during Enron, post-Enron years when the whole power industry was in such turmoil.
Yeah.
Retired for a brief period and then took on this role at the partnership 6.5 years ago.
Wow. And what would you say in the 6.5 years that you've been there, you and your team, what have you accomplished that you're proud of?
Well, that's a fair question. We've had to fight some battles, and one battle we had to fight was against some bad legislation. So, there was a very public bathroom bill debate in the last legislative session, and it really took the business community, and I would say it took the partnership ultimately to just tell Austin that stop the foolishness. That's not what we want Austin to be focused on.
There are some movements in the legislature this year that is really challenging a pro-business environment in the state of Texas.
Yeah, I would.
And that's scary.
Yeah, we probably have had that issue now for the last several sessions.
Yeah.
If anything, I would say about this session, as it's just beginning to shape up, is it's probably moving in a more positive direction. I think the November election results told some of the fringe elements that they needed to move back towards the middle.
Right.
So we're having a great conversation about public education in this session. We didn't expect to have that discussion in this session. We thought we were a session or two away.
Right.
So we're talking about funding and how to improve public education. I hope that extends to higher ed. I'm not sure how much room there'll be in that discussion for higher ed. So I'm really thinking we're going to have a more pro-business. Now, we, the partnership, care a lot about economic development incentives. That's a pretty boring topic, but
they're important.
They're important. We have high property taxes in Texas. We have very high property taxes in Texas. The way we offset that for companies that are moving to Texas is to provide some form of abatement. Maybe a 50% abatement, maybe for 5 years, maybe for 10 years. That issue of providing those incentives is very much under debate in Austin. So
right.
We'll focus on
that. Is it 312?
Chapter 312.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right.
It's Chapter 312. It's very much under debate. It's going to be very interesting to see how that turns out. Speaking of how things turned out, I like to ask the different CEOs that I talked to, although it happened a few months ago, the Amazon decision.
Yeah.
And the residual of that, what we're finding, and everyone kind of knew, was that there were a lot of players on the sidelines waiting for that decision to come down. The decision happened. It is what it is. Are you finding a wave-like effect or a residual effect here in Houston?
I would say Amazon, at the end of the day, had a positive effect.
Okay.
Unfortunately, Houston was a city that did not make the final 20. So we were out early.
Right.
And in a shocking way for Houston, the fourth largest city in the country, to not be in the final 20.
And I should have known that.
What it told us was that we were more lacking in digital talent than we realized.
Right.
And I mentioned at a session earlier tonight, CBRE ranks digital tech talent, and we rank 31st.
Yeah.
And no one was prepared to hear that. But after the Amazon result, all of a sudden people started asking, well, why did Amazon not include us in the final 20? And that was the key issue. So we've had great productive conversation and some real activity and action in Houston since then that I really attribute to the fact that we say a wake-up call. Both the mayor and I said this needs to be a wake-up call for Houston, and it proved to be that. And so we've seen a lot of positive, constructive momentum since then. With all the activity in Midtown and what we call the Innovation Corridor, all that kind of grew up out of that Amazon discussion.
Right. And how is Houston, nationally, internationally, people hear Houston, they think energy.
They do.
They think, which is a good thing to.
It's a good thing, but
I don't know if it's something you want to totally hang your hat on and be known for. But there's other things happening in Houston.
Thank you for saying that.
Besides energy.
Right. Yeah. So let's start with energy.
Yeah.
Right. It's been 118 years since Spindletop. And I tell people, that's a long time. We've ridden that wave, pretty well. And energy will continue to be important. So the issue for Houston, we're the energy capital of the world, is how do we shift to more of a renewables focus? How do we acknowledge the carbon issue and climate change? How do we become productive agents in that discussion so that Houston has seen, we're energy, but we're part of that what we call new energy, the modern energy. So that's part of it. But we also find we have to develop these other areas of our economy. Houston's very strong in life sciences. So when you think about a second dimension of Houston, with the Texas Medical Center, the amount of research activity here, but what we haven't had is the commercialization of that research. That commercialization took place in Boston or on the West Coast. What would happen, they would come license the technology, and away it would go. So we're trying to develop all that infrastructure, which we all think about in a lot of different contexts. How do we help an academic who's part of a research project see the opportunity to commercialize that research? So a lot of things happening at TMC around that. So, we're making headway, but we have a good way to go. But there are other aspects. Houston is a global city.
Right.
When I compare, Dallas, Austin, Houston. Austin is Austin. I mean, I don't need to say much more. As a tech hub, it's become a very high-growth tech hub. That's wonderful. We need to get some of that tech activity to Houston.
Right.
Dallas, FinTech. It's a more diverse economy, a lot of financial services and elsewhere, a good broad base. Houston is really the global city of Texas. Our air connectivity, we have the 92 consulate offices in Houston. We have the presence of a lot of the international companies choose to locate in Houston. So we're making that kind of the centerpiece of our strategy, that Houston is where you locate to serve all of the Americas or all of the world, because we're truly a global city.
How active are you in the recruiting of companies relocating to the greater Houston area?
That's
job one.
That's job one.
Yeah.
We have a large economic development team at the partnership. We work with the city. We work with what we call our regional allies. All the parts of greater Houston each has their own chamber or their own economic development organization. We typically are the entry point for prospects, and then we basically pass those prospects out to wherever we think it's appropriate. So we work closely with those allies. But we work with those companies. We sell them on Houston. We give them the data they need. We help them think about incentives, as we were talking about. But we market Houston, and part of that growth that we've seen in terms of employment. I'll give you another stat: 750,000 jobs we've added since the Great Recession, since 2010.
Wow.
So a lot of good stuff's been happening. People tend to focus on the cyclicality of the oil and gas industry, because that kind of becomes the headline. But underneath that cyclicality is a city and a region that's just always growing at a rapid rate.
Well, I love Houston. I live in Austin, been there for a long time, but I love Houston.
Well,
I do. It's a great city.
Well, thank you.
City.
Thank you.
It. Bob, thank you very much for your time.
Appreciate it.
We appreciate it. It's a pleasure meeting you.
That's it.